You know, I've heard a lot of people recently say, Mike, I just can't get into horror because it's just shock and schlock and all that kind of stuff. In most cases, I'll agree sometimes that's true. But with these, well, guys, these are just some great stories. Hey, what's up, bookworms? Mike back again to talk a little horror on the channel because it's something I don't feel that we do ever enough. But this, guys, I want to make you understand up front, this is not a horror for beginners kind of video. I have already made that video. I recommend you check out if you're looking to get into horror in the easiest way possible. I think that's the video that you'd be looking for. This is more for people who, I would say, maybe aren't opposed to horror. They just really haven't found anything that works for them yet. So what I think that might work for you, well, some stories that got some really great characters or just a really great story, because there are some really great horror stories out there that you don't have to be just a complete horror enthusiast such as myself to enjoy them. So we're going to kind of talk about a few of them for a minute or two here, kind of talk about the themes of each and think maybe, hey, these might be for some that are for you. Let's begin with one of my favorite books of all time. This is Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. Not much really I could tell you that you probably haven't heard already at this point. Look, it's one of the greatest coming of age stories of all time. But what I like about this one is it is about the importance of accepting one's age, you know, the natural progression of life rather than trying to control it or escape it. But I also love that this book, when I was younger, I read it because I liked the teenage character, the preteen characters. I thought it was great. That's why I wanted my coming of age story in a horror setting. That was something I wanted. But reading it as an older person, that's what I'll say, an older person, let's leave it at that. Some really great dad shit, as I like to call it here. There's some stuff in here that's really about this dad, you know, worrying about being too old to keep up with his young kids because he had them a little later in life. Stuff like that I do love. And this really does play with the idea of, you know, just accepting where you're at in your life. And I think that's something that all of us can really enjoy. One of the greatest stories on here, guys. Ray Bradbury. Amazing, amazing. How about The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson? Now, I know a lot of you have watched the Netflix show. Well, I'll tell you, the book isn't like the Netflix show, because I have a lot of people that get really upset. They really like the Netflix show. They got the book and they're like, wow, it's nothing like the show. No, it's not. Mike Flanagan clearly loves this book, but that wasn't really what he was going through with the show. This one, I think, is a different kind of horror, very psychological horror, because it deals with like the fragile state of the human mind, you know, and how like fear and paranoia, it can kind of affect the perception of reality. And this is one of those great books that have you questioning, is this really happening or not? Is this in these people's head? Are they going mad? But it deals with a lot of those character moments in this family dealing with one each other. It's something that's like the classic story of, you know, you get a bunch of people, lock them in a house and see what happens. You know, I think it's one of those where you really get into the psyche of what makes these characters work. And Shirley Jackson, one of the best ever to do it. I think at a video like this, you guys are going to expect me to talk about Stephen King. Well, I have a rule for videos like this, and it's one book per author. So what one horror book by Stephen King would I recommend above all others? Well, I mean, my favorite Stephen King book of all time is It. And I know that's kind of sound like the bandwagon answer at this point, because the movie's brought a lot of new fans to the story of It. But the reason that it resonates so well is because the story is very deserving of the legacy that it has. What I love about this one is very much about the power of friendship. You know, these kids all have kind of come with just a broken childhood. They all have some kind of childhood trauma. Something that Stephen King does just the best, obviously, is coming of age, and then under a supernatural setting. So you got some kind of duress there, because they're adding to that childhood trauma outside of what you or I had. Hopefully, you weren't chased by an 8-foot tall, you know, scary clown with razor sharp teeth. With this is you have 7 coming of age stories, and you will feel like the 8th loser in the Losers Club reading this book because of how well that friendship is written. And again, Stephen King, no one writes kids as good as him. This has amazing stories. And guys, even if you've seen both TV and the movie adaptation, there's so much more in the book that you don't get in either of those. This is definitely worth your time. If you like those movies, consider this the director's cut and go all in. How about The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty? Yes, I know this is one that's going to shock anybody, I just say, but this one, gosh, it's just a very, very essence of faith versus doubt. You know, Father Merrin's really battling demons in more ways than one. You know, good versus evil, the struggle between science and religion. This might be the greatest horror story of all time. And it's not just because of the big scary monster in it, Pazuzu. It really has some things in it of what the parent is dealing with, what the priest is dealing with. It's just a crisis of conscience. There is a lot of things in here that I think that you wouldn't expect if you've only seen the movie. Because I had seen the movie dozens and dozens of times before I read the book about 2 years ago, and it completely floored me. I love the book just as much as I love that movie already. It really is a good one. How about some Cormac McCarthy? Now with this, when you get to like dystopian, post-apocalyptic, a lot of people start being like, oh, that's more sci-fi than horror. But I'm going to put it on this list because I look at it through the lens of a parent. Talking about The Road, of course. The Road by Cormac McCarthy, trying to hang on to how the world was and how far you will go to protect your child. That's something I think, I read this book before I had kids, and it really hit me emotionally. I can't even imagine trying to read this book now. I would be a mess. So this is one of those, like, it will pull on your heartstrings in ways you won't expect, but it's definitely just an amazing, amazing story what these characters go through in this hellish setting. You know, and it is one of those that makes you realize, hey, how we used to be, we can't be like that no more. And it's trying to get to that new way of thinking. It really is a hell of a journey for the characters, for the man and the boy in this. And it always makes me want to coke. So how about some newer books? I know you guys are saying these are mostly just horror classics here. You're doing a paint by numbers. I do have some more modern authors I want to talk about. But before we do that, and that brings us to the sponsor of today's video, guys, which is a box of stories. Now, this is a bi-monthly horror box subscription service that has custom designed merch, books, and other bonus content. So I'll go ahead and give a quick look at what you can expect to get every other month with a box of stories. Now, this is an invite-only service, guys. It is not open to the public. So this is something that's going to be an invite-only for viewers of this channel. And if you go ahead and click the link and join up, use the code MikeHorrorBox, and you can get free lifetime shipping on all of these designs, as well as a free horror tote with your first order. Now, there are multiple plans, guys. I'm going to list those down below with the links to each one, tell you about the costs involved and kind of what everything does dictate what you'll get with each new box. But this is a service that can be canceled at any time, so no worries about that. First box is going to ship out on June the 1st. If you guys are unhappy with it, worry not. There is a satisfaction guarantee. If you are not pleased with the product, they offer your full money back, no questions asked. So buy with confidence. Box of stories, guys, where they are passionate about saving great books, introducing readers to new authors, hidden gems, and undiscovered voices. I want to thank them again for sending this over. It is very, very cool. So how about Boys in the Valley by Philip Fracassi? I read this one last year and it completely blew me away. I was not expecting to like it nearly as much as I did. Very much the theme of keep hope, no matter how dark. You're just kind of standing in the face of insurmountable evil and just kind of keeping hope, retaining hope, and just standing your ground. That's a theme that I don't think that we'll ever get tired of as humanity, really. So I think it's one of those that you look at this and say, yeah, there's some big scary stuff happening, but there is some really, really sick individual growth in this book with some of these main characters. And this is one of those I was like, the only complaint I have is it wasn't longer and we couldn't develop a bit more of those side characters because I want to know more about all of the kids in this orphanage. But damn good story. And maybe a Philip Fracassi reader for sure going forward and everything else he puts out. And I think right now, if you had to say, look, who is your favorite modern horror author writing right now? Without a doubt, it's Ronald Malfi. He's completely, I've read 4 of his books. They've all kind of blown me away at this point. 5. I've read 5 of his books now. And they've all just kind of either really, really good or like, holy crap, that was amazing. I have to go with Blackmouth here because I think it is overall the best story. What I'm going to say about Ronald Malfi is, say you like Stephen King, because Ronald Malfi is very much Stephen King adjacent, I think. Say you like Stephen King, but you think he might go on a little long. You want a little shorter books. You want a little books that get to the point a little faster. I think that Ronald Malfi is going to be one for you. Blackmouth, I can see a lot of people who liked it are probably going to like the story. I don't think they're as similar as you think, except it's like, here's something we did when we were kids and we got to go back as adults and face it. That's something in horror I will always be on board with, no matter how it goes. But in this, I think Ronald Malfi's probably done the best I've seen besides Stephen King. So yeah, if you liked it, I think that you'll love Blackmouth. Incredible story. And it's one of those, again, I actually say that he's a good gateway horror author, I think, if you're looking to get into horror, because his stuff, it isn't really going to be just like overly disgusting or anything, if you don't want gore or things like that. But I think if you just want just really good story, amazing characters, he's writing characters like the Mike Flanagan style where you really get connected to those characters and you don't want anything to happen to them. Or he writes them really, really flawed. I think Blackmouth will be the story that you're going to really, really dig. One of my favorites of all time is Anne Rice. She will forever be my vampire queen. And when I read Interview with a Vampire as a teenager, man, that book completely changed my life. Very much about the loss of humanity, moral ambiguity, the consequences of immortality. This is a story that's always really resonated with me outside of other vampire stories, because you took it the side of like, not all vampires just, haha, I'm evil, I'm going to go suck some blood. It's like they're dealing with the loss of their humanity. And for the case of like Louis versus Lestat here, it really is just a journey of a character that's like you just feel awful for. And it's like, yeah, you get to live forever, but what's the cost of that? Giving up your humanity and seeing all your loved ones die and things like that and dealing with that guilt. And Louis has a lot of guilt. And it's a great story. And it is the introduction to one of the greatest characters ever, the vampire Lestat. Heart-shaped box, son of Stephen. This is Joe Hill, in case you guys don't know. Heart-shaped box was one I did not expect to like nearly as much as I did. I read Nosferatu first, and I really liked it. I was like, okay, maybe the apple didn't fall too far from the tree here. So I always put off reading Joe Hill because I was such a Stephen King fan. I was worried it was going to make me have unreal expectations of him. So I didn't read Horns when it came out. I remember reading the review for Horns, and like it said the name Stephen King like 19 times. I was like, poor guy, But I thought, okay, enough times went by. So I read Nosferatu, really liked it. And a lot of people said, you got to check out Heart-Shaped Box, especially being into rock music like you are. This book was so good, man. Mental manipulation and abuse, animal companions, just full on, just like haunting. But, really that love is the power to conquer evil, that kind of thing. Might sound cliche, but the way that Joe does it, he writes it much better than I can explain it to you. What this really blew me away was the idea of dogs being familiars. I think that's something that's really I love. I'm a fantasy fan first, guys, so I love animal companions, and the ones in here are some of the best that I've read, especially in horror. Really great. This book was genuinely creepy. There was some really haunting parts that were just like, I got kind of like look around. What was that sound in the room? Man, what a good story! And you think you know how it's going to go with some of these side characters, and no, those side characters are awesome in this. They really are great. And it made me say I'm going to read whatever Joe Hill. I can't wait for King Sorrow this fall. I'm going to be doing that for sure. Another dystopian one. And I think if I can't have The Stand on here, because I said one Stephen King for sure, I'm going to have to go with Swan Song by Robert McCammon. This very much is going to always get people to say, well, do you like that or do you like The Stand? I think they're both amazing stories. I think they both have very big differences. One is about, an epidemic that kills most of the population. This one is obviously, how do we endure the power of hope in a post-nuclear war? It's very much a redemption in a post-apocalyptic world kind of story. And what's incredible about this is these characters get put through the ringer and you will fight and die for them. They are that lovable. You love these characters so much. And then the ones that you love to hate. That right too. There is no in between with this. You love the characters, you love to hate them. They're all amazing characters. And it was one of those where I was like, that could have been, it was like a 1,000-page book and I blew through it in a few days because it's just such a page turner. It could have been 1,000 more, and I kept reading. It was just that good. As characters in that are just amazing. And again, I just love characters that work hard. And those characters, man, they never, ever give up. So you want enduring hope in a time of bleakness. I think the Swan Song is definitely going to be the book for you. It's my book of the year a couple years ago. Let the Right One In, John Lindqvist. This is a different kind of vampire story that I've ever read before. It really is just super dark, but it's about, love and friendship and kind of the darker side of humanity and how loneliness will make you just want to latch on to anyone that will have you. This guy finds out, this preteen who's very disturbed because he's been bullied and things his whole life. He's very disturbed. Very much feels like a Stephen King kind of like an apt pupil kind of character, disturbed. And then he's like, he finds out that his neighbor is a vampire and he befriends this vampire. And of course, naturally will do anything for her, but is she going to make him a vampire or is she just, using him? It's one of those things that really is just a messed up journey. But this is a book that's very dark, guys, very messed up. So all the trigger warnings for this one, because it's like, even if you've seen the movies, the book is worse. It's so much worse. It's so much more disgusting and violent. That stuff is in there, but it is a really solid story. And it captures solitary and loneliness so well. When we're just like, as humans, we have to have a connection of some sort. And that brings me to my last story here, which is also a vampire story, and I think embodies all of that in the best way possible. This is I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. I almost said Robert Matheson. Richard Matheson, psychological impact of loneliness, really, because he is the last man on Earth, and there are other beings. I won't tell you. I think at this point, you know, it's vampires. But it's just the links that you'll go to for survival, you think, and kind of the marginalization of others that are different than us, obviously. I mean, you think, okay, these are vampires, obviously, they're bad, but it gets way, way deeper into that. Some might call it allegory. I'm not sure. I didn't read it that way, but if you want to take it that way, you can. But does it have a message? I think so, and it's a message that I've never forgotten about. Read this, God, I think maybe 19 or 20 years old, and man, I was just blown away. So Robert Neville, what an amazing, amazing story. I think that's why I wanted to say Robert Matheson, because Dr. Robert Neville is the protagonist in this book. But again, Animal Companion, great book, guys. It really is a thrilling read, and it's like one of those, like, I don't care if you're into horror or not, if you're not into dystopian, post-apocalyptic, all that stuff. That's a book I think everyone should read. I think it's going to find some kind of message in that book is going to reach everyone in some kind of way. Because at one point or another in our lives, guys, I feel like we've all suffered from loneliness or feeling like we're alone, like we're the last person on earth. So that's a really, really a book that left a lasting impression on me. And I think it would for you too, no matter what age you are. So guys, those are books I think, again, this isn't really what I would say is for beginners for horror, but if you're just looking for a really great story, you've been kind of like, I don't know, horror hasn't really landed for me, and you're looking for something to kind of open that door and make you become a horror fan, I think these might be the way, because these are, again, are great stories over anything else. It's not like, I mean, sometimes you can just watch your slasher film, you turn your brain off, have some popcorn, and watch that. But these, I think, really focus more on the characters and the story, much more than anything else. And again, with these themes that are involved with all these, you see these authors really had something amazing to say. So guys, did I leave anything off? These are the ones that I can think of that I've read. I'm always looking to add more to them. So you know some horror stories that you think are more than just the blood and the guts and the evil monster. You want to talk about just amazing characters and a great story, please drop them below. I'm always looking to add to the list, especially if it's some modern horror authors, because I am still looking for a lot of new modern horror authors. So drop in the comments, guys, and I will talk to you there.